My fiancé betrayed my trust and sold our engagement ring for a girl's holiday. Be me, 29 years old, been engaged to Jessica, 27, for almost 2 years. Together for 5 years total. Until recently thought we had a solid relationship. Now everything's falling apart. Working as an architectural designer in Minneapolis. But my real passion is woodworking. Started it as a hobby when I was a teenager. Over the years, it became my escape from daily life. Love making things with my hands. Furniture, carvings, and even jewelry. Something satisfying about turning raw materials into beautiful things. When it came time to propose to Jessica, didn't want to just walk into some store. Buying a random ring felt too impersonal. Wanted something meaningful, something that represented us as a couple. Decided to make the ring myself. Spent weeks designing it. Simple rose gold band with a sapphire in the center. Jessica loves unique understated jewelry. Thought it would be perfect for her. Materials alone cost me a fortune. But the time and effort meant way more than money. When I proposed, Jessica was over the moon. She cried when I told her I made the ring. Kept saying how much she loved it. Showed it off to everyone. Telling all her friends and family how special it was. We've been planning our wedding ever since. Everything from picking venues to choosing flowers. Even tiny details like table settings. For 2 years straight, she wore that ring every single day. Until about 3 weeks ago, first noticed it when we were getting ready for dinner. Jessica wasn't wearing the ring. Pretty unusual for her. Didn't say anything at first. Figured maybe she forgot to put it on. Or took it off while cleaning. But then noticed it again the next day. And the day after that, started paying more attention. Became clear she wasn't wearing it at all anymore. Thought maybe something happened to it. Maybe it got damaged. Or she lost it and was too scared to tell me. One night we're sitting on the couch. Casually ask her, "Hey, where's your ring? Haven't seen you wearing it lately?" She looks at me for a second. Says she took it to the jeweler to get it cleaned. That answer didn't sit right with me. I made the ring myself. Always been the one to clean and polish it. Whenever it needed a touch-up. She's never mentioned taking it to a jeweler before. Honestly felt strange she'd do that without telling me. Didn't want to seem controlling though. Just nodded and said, "Oh, okay." Still, something about it kept bugging me. Few days passed. Still no sign of the ring. Brought it up again. Tried to sound casual. "When's your ring coming back from the jeweler?" She glances at me. Says it's taking longer than expected. Claims they're busy. That answer only made me feel worse. What kind of jeweler takes this long to clean a ring? I've cleaned it myself before. Takes like 10 minutes tops. Didn't push her on it though. Told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe she just wanted to give me a break from maintaining it. Or maybe I was reading too much into it. But as more time went by, couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. Every time I looked at her hand, felt like a reminder. Something was missing. Not just the ring, but the connection we had. Started checking around the house, hoping maybe she just left it somewhere. Looked in her jewelry box, on her nightstand, even in the kitchen where she sometimes takes off her rings while cooking. Ring was nowhere to be found. Thought about asking her again, but didn't want to seem obsessive. If something was wrong, she'd tell me eventually, but couldn't shake the feeling. She was hiding something from me. Started questioning everything. Was I making a big deal out of nothing? Or was there something deeper going on? 3 weeks now. Still haven't seen the ring. Jessica acts like everything's fine. Like there's nothing weird about this situation. But I can't ignore this nagging feeling in my gut. That ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of everything we stood for. And now it's gone. And I don't know what to think. Few days later, having dinner together, Jessica casually drops a bomb. "Oh, by the way, I'm going on a weekend trip with Victoria and Diana." Says it like it's no big deal. Just a little girl's getaway. I freeze for a second. Try to process what she just said. "When did this come up?" I ask. Try to keep my voice neutral. She just shrugs. "We've all been so stressed. We just thought why not take a weekend to relax. Nothing crazy, just some downtime at a cabin upstate. Here's the thing though. We've been saving money like crazy. Between wedding planning, trying to get a more reliable car, and some unexpected expenses earlier this year, we've been cutting back on everything. No vacations, no unnecessary purchases, even skipping our usual date nights. Something we both agreed on months ago. So I'm confused about this sudden trip. Try not to sound too alarmed. How long have you been planning this?" "Not long," she says. Brushes it off like it's nothing. Victoria suggested it and Diana's on board. "They really want me to come. We've all been stressed. It's just a weekend. I think it'll be fun. Nothing about this feels right. How much is it going to cost?" Jessica shrugs again. "Not much. We're splitting the cabin. It's just a couple of days. It won't break the bank." Her answers are super vague. Only makes me more uneasy. Where are you getting the money for this? "We've been saving for months. Agreed to put everything toward the wedding and car. Try to keep my tone even, but can't hide my concern. She gives me quick, "Don't worry about it. I've been saving up here and there." Goes back to her phone. That answer makes zero sense. Jessica hasn't mentioned saving for anything like this. We share everything about our finances. Can't think of a single time in months when she talked about having extra money for something like this, but I don't push it. Maybe she really had been saving, and I just didn't notice. Let the conversation drop, but something about it keeps bugging me. Next evening, I come home from work. Jessica's in our bedroom packing a bag. Watching her fold clothes, carefully tucking away toiletries, makes it all real. This trip isn't just an idea anymore. It's happening. She's leaving in a day or two. Still don't want to press too hard. Don't want to turn this into an argument. But the more I think about it, the more the whole thing bugs me. Jessica isn't one to make plans like this on a whim. If she had been saving up, why didn't she mention it before? Something feels off. Next day, decide to bring it up again. "So what's the plan for this trip?" I ask. Try to sound casual. "Are you guys splitting everything?" It seems like it would add up. Gas, food, the cabin. Are you sure it's affordable? Jessica sighs, clearly irritated that I'm still asking questions. "I told you it's all covered." Victoria found a great deal. "We're dividing the costs evenly." "Even so," I say carefully. "It's not just the cabin, right?" "Are you sure this is the right time for something like this?" She rolls her eyes, tosses her phone on the couch. "Nathan, I've got it covered." Why are you acting like this is such a big deal? "It's just a weekend. I need this." Her defensiveness only makes me more uneasy. "I'm just trying to understand." "That's all," I say. "We've been so tight with money. And this feels kind of sudden. Where's the money coming from?" Her face changes for a split second, just enough for me to notice, like she wasn't sure how to answer. That hesitation makes my stomach drop. "Jessica," I say carefully. "What's going on?" She shifts uncomfortably, refuses to meet my eyes. "I told you," she says after a moment. "I've got it handled. You don't need to worry about it." "That's not an answer," I say, my voice firmer now. "We've been planning every penny we spend for months, and now you're suddenly pulling money out of nowhere for a trip. I'm not trying to start a fight, but I need to know, where did the money come from?" She looks annoyed, like I'm putting her on the spot for no reason. "Fine," she says. Throws her hands up. "If you must know, I pawned my ring, okay? That's where the money came from." Just stare at her, trying to process what she just said. "What? You pawned your engagement ring?" My voice quieter now. "Why?" "Because I needed the money," she says. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It's not gone forever. I'll get it back after the trip." Can't believe what I'm hearing. My chest tightens as her words sink in, each one hitting harder than the last. She pawned the ring I made for her, a piece of myself I poured hours into crafting, just to go on some stupid trip. Was this how little it meant to her? Was this how little I meant to her? "Jessica, that ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. I made that ring for you. I spent weeks on it because I wanted it to mean something. And you just pawned it without even telling me." My voice shakes with anger. "It's my ring," she says defensively. "I didn't think I needed your permission to do what I want with it. Besides, it's not like I sold it. It's temporary." "It's not about needing my permission," I say. Try to stay calm. "It's about the fact that you made a huge decision. One that affects both of us. Without even talking to me. That ring was supposed to symbolize our relationship, and you just got rid of it like it was nothing." "I didn't get rid of it," she shoots back. "I'm getting it back." Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Her tone, her body language, everything about her response makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. She doesn't seem to understand or care what the ring meant to me. To her, it was just a means to an end. Try to sound as measured as I could. "Jessica, I don't think this is the right time for a trip. We're supposed to be saving. And pawning your ring to make it happen just feels wrong." "I can't cancel now," she says. Crosses her arms. "I already told Victoria and Diana I'm going. We've been planning this, and I need the break." At that point, didn't see the point in saying anything else. Could have stopped her. Could have made it impossible for her to leave. But why bother, if she couldn't even see the problem in the first place? The next morning, she packed her bags, without a hint of hesitation, walked out the door like it was just another day. "We'll talk when I get back," she tosses over her shoulder. I stood there watching her go, knowing full well that any conversation we'd have after this wouldn't change a damn thing. Also knew for sure, things won't be the same anymore after she left. Just sat there like, what the hell just happened? She straight up told me she pawned the engagement ring. I spent so much time and effort on like it was nothing. Then went on a trip with her friends. Didn't ask, didn't give me a heads up, just dropped it on me like, oh, by the way. At first, tried to let it go. Told myself it wasn't worth getting worked up over. While she was gone, but the longer I sat there, the worse it felt. It wasn't even just about the ring or the trip anymore. It was the way she handled everything. Like my input didn't matter. Like I was just supposed to roll with it. The secrecy, the dismissiveness, the whole attitude. It felt so off. Spent the next hour just doom scrolling my phone, trying to distract myself. But it wasn't working. My brain kept circling back to her trip. Jessica's not usually this impulsive, and she's definitely not the type to jump on some last-minute plan. Without thinking it through, none of it made sense, especially since money's been tight lately. So I started digging. If she wasn't going to tell me what was really going on, I had to figure it out myself. Started with her friends Victoria and Diana. Look, I'll be honest, I've never been a fan of those two. They're the type who seem to live for drama and dumb decisions. From what I know, neither of them would ever willingly sign up for a quiet weekend getaway. Their version of a trip is loud clubs, bad choices, and regret-packed mornings. The idea that they were planning some peaceful cabin retreat. Yeah, not buying it. Something about this whole thing wasn't adding up. Opened Instagram, searched for Victoria's profile. Sure enough, most recent post was a picture of a cabin surrounded by trees. Caption, "Girls' weekend begins, let's go!" The cabin looked expensive. Way too nice to be the kind of place you'd go to on a tight budget, then notice something else in Victoria's caption. "Shout out to my man for helping make this trip happen. You're the best." That was weird. Jessica hadn't mentioned anything about Victoria's boyfriend funding part of the trip. In fact, she'd made it sound like they were all splitting the cost evenly. Got me wondering, did Jessica pawn the ring? Because she felt like she had to keep up with her friends? Victoria and Diana. The more I thought about it, the more it kind of added up. Jessica's always been close to Victoria. Honestly, she seems to admire her whole lifestyle. Free-spirited, no-strings-attached vibe. Wouldn't be surprised if she felt some pressure to match that, even if it meant making choices that didn't make sense. And now that I think about it, the way she brushed off my questions about the trip felt off. Like she wasn't giving me the whole picture. Kept scrolling through Victoria's feed, but there wasn't much about the trip. Just a couple of generic quality time with the girls posts, and some pics of her packing. Nothing that stood out. So I checked Diana's profile. She's usually more low-key online, but her latest story caught my eye. It was a boomerang of her and Victoria clinking glasses, captioned cabin vibes, and in the background, a fully stocked bar. This didn't feel right. Jessica had made it seem like this was a getaway, but everything I was seeing pointed to something much bigger. Felt a knot form in my stomach. Was there more to this trip than she'd let on? And if so, why wouldn't she just tell me the truth? Sat back trying to make sense of it all. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe Victoria and Diana were just the kind of people who liked to make everything seem fancier than it really was. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. That's when I noticed Jessica's laptop, sitting on the kitchen counter, closed but just sitting there, plain as day. She must have forgotten it. In her rush to leave for the trip, stood there for a solid minute, just staring at it, going back and forth in my head. On one hand, opening it felt invasive, like crossing a line I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. But then again, she'd already been hiding things, pawned something that meant so much to me, and completely brushed off everything I said. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like, you know what? I deserve to know what's really going on. So I grabbed it, opened the lid and logged in, powered on the laptop, navigated to her messages. Their group chat opened easily. As I scrolled through, my stomach tightened. The most recent messages were all about the trip, and the further I read, the worse it got. This wasn't some quiet weekend getaway. They were planning nights out at bars, meeting guys, and getting wasted, and see what happens. One message from Victoria practically jumped off the screen. Leave the ring at home. No one needs to know you're engaged this weekend. My hands gripped the edge of the counter. As I reread it, anger and disbelief flooding through me. Kept scrolling, my stomach sinking further with every message. Diana chimed in. Yeah, this is your chance to have some fun before getting married. Don't let him hold you back. Jessica's response? A laughing emoji, and sure, I could definitely use a little freedom. Freedom. That word hit me like a truck. Freedom from what? Me? The life we were building together? Kept scrolling, hoping there'd be something, anything that would make this make sense. But it only got worse. Diana even joked about how they could act single for the weekend without anyone finding out. And Jessica? She didn't say a damn thing to shut it down. Instead, she laughed along, like it was all just some harmless joke. I couldn't believe she was that stupid to trust girls like this. or even listen to them. It was like she thought, no matter what she did, I'd still be there picking up the pieces. Felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. This wasn't just about the money or the ring anymore. This was about trust. And everything I was reading made it clear that Jessica had no problem. Throwing that trust away, sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But another part of me, probably the louder part, knew I couldn't ignore this. I needed to do something. For a moment, I thought about calling her. But what would I even say? Hey, Jessica, I just read your group chat. And now I know you've been lying to me about this trip. No, that wouldn't work. This wasn't the kind of conversation I could have over the phone. It had to be face-to-face. Still, I couldn't pretend like everything was fine while she was out there, lying to me and making a fool of our relationship. At that moment, I just knew I wasn't going to continue this relationship with someone who could lie to my face, throw away something so personal, and make decisions behind my back. If she was capable of this now, even before we were married, what would she do once we were married and life got tougher? Everything I thought I knew about Jessica, about our relationship, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. What she did wasn't some minor mistake. It was huge, at least for me. Call me whatever you want. But I just couldn't see a future with someone who could so easily disrespect me. And our relationship? This wasn't about insecurity or overreacting. It was about trust, honesty, and what kind of partnership I wanted in life. And clearly that wasn't something we could have anymore. So I did the first thing that came into my mind, opened my laptop, started pulling up all the details for the wedding we'd been planning, venues, caterers, flowers, every vendor we'd booked. I wasn't even sure what I was doing at first. It felt impulsive, almost reckless. But as I stared at the confirmation emails, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Started making calls and canceling everything. The venue was the hardest. It had taken months to find, and the deposit was painful to lose. But as I told the coordinator the wedding was off, I felt a weird sense of relief, like I was finally taking back control. After that, canceled the caterer and florist, spending hours undoing months of planning. It was exhausting, but there was no way I could go through with a wedding when the person I was supposed to marry couldn't even respect me enough to be honest. Canceling the wedding wasn't enough though. Jessica was still on that trip, lying and acting like she was single. I couldn't just let her get away with it, especially knowing other people were caught in the lies too. Kept thinking about the group chat messages, Victoria and Diana bragging about how no one needs to know. They were planning to act single. They thought they were slick, pulling one over on everyone, but they weren't as smart as they thought. If Jessica's behavior was anything to go by, there was no way Victoria and Diana's boyfriends had a clue about what was really going on. This wasn't just about me anymore. Those guys deserved to know the truth about the kind of women they were dealing with. I wasn't about to sit back and let them treat all this deceit like it was some kind of joke. They needed to be exposed, and I was ready to make sure it happened. Opened my phone and started searching. Didn't take long to find Victoria's boyfriend Marcus on Instagram. He was tagged in several of her photos. His profile was public. Hey Marcus, I wrote. I know this is completely random, but I'm Jessica's fiancé, and I just found some messages between her, Victoria, and Diana about their trip. I think you should know what's going on. Attached screenshots of the group chat, specifically the messages where Victoria talked about leaving her ring behind and acting single. After double-checking everything, hit send. Did the same for Diana's boyfriend Tom. He was a bit harder to find, but after scrolling through Diana's profile, found him tagged in a photo, sent him a similar message, along with the same screenshots. After that, felt a wave of anxiety. What if they didn't believe me? What if this only made things worse? But then the responses started coming in. Marcus was the first to reply. Wait, what? Are you serious? Victoria told me they were just going to relax at a cabin. She never mentioned anything about going to bars or acting single. Tom's response was similar. Dude, thanks for telling me. Diana made it sound like this was just a quiet weekend with her friends. I had no idea. Both of them were understandably upset. We exchanged messages for a while, as I explained everything I'd found. Marcus was especially angry. I've been feeling weird about this trip since she mentioned it, he said. I should have trusted my gut. Over the next couple of hours, started hearing about the fallout. Marcus messaged me again. It's been chaos, man. I confronted Victoria, and she tried to brush it off, like it wasn't a big deal. When I didn't buy it, she said Jessica was the one who came up with the idea to leave the rings behind. That was it for me. I packed my stuff and moved out that night. Tom wasn't far behind. Diana's been trying to spin the whole thing, saying it was just jokes. But I'm not buying it. I went to her parents' house to talk it out. Because she wouldn't even give me a straight answer. From what they told me, it was pure chaos. Victoria and Diana turned on each other, trying to shift the blame, and Jessica wasn't off the hook either. Apparently, Victoria told Marcus that Jessica had dragged them into this mess to make herself look better. By the time I finished talking to them, felt a strange mix of emotions. It felt good to know I wasn't alone in this, that other people were just as blindsided as I was. But it was heartbreaking to see how much damage this trip had caused, not just to me, but to Marcus and Tom as well. After that, I decided to just let it all go and focus on myself. I'd done what I could, and there was no point in obsessing over it anymore. Spent the day trying to get my head straight, cleaning up, taking Duke for a walk, avoiding anything that reminded me of Jessica. The house still felt weird though, too quiet, too empty. But I told myself it was better this way. I couldn't control what she'd done, but I could control how I moved forward. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "What's going on, Nathan?" "Victoria said you messaged Marcus. Why would you do that?" I stared at the screen for a second, my stomach twisting, before tossing the phone aside. I wasn't about to let her drag me back into her mess. Stared at the screen for a moment, debating how to respond. I wasn't about to get into an argument over text. Texted back. "We need to talk. Come back home so we can have a real conversation. Face to face." Her response came quickly. "I can't just leave Nathan. We've had this trip planned for weeks. I don't understand why you're doing this right now. I wasn't going to get pulled into a back and forth. Come back so we can talk properly. If not, don't expect to find me here. When you get back, that's all I'm saying." No reply came after that. Whatever happened next, I knew things would never be the same anymore. She came back late the next day. I didn't even hear the door open at first, but her voice cut through the silence. "Nathan, are you serious right now?" she said, sharp and accusatory, like I was the one who messed up. I turned around to see her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking equal parts pissed and shocked. "Glad you decided to come back," I said. Keeping my tone calm, the last thing I wanted was for this to turn into a yelling match. "I can't believe you," she snapped. Stepping into the room, Victoria and Diana are furious. Marcus and Tom are blowing up their phones. And now it's all being blamed on me. "What the hell were you thinking, Nathan?" I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. "I was thinking it's time for some honesty. You said we talk when you got back. So here we are." "Let's talk," she scoffs, drops her bag onto the floor with a thud. "This is how you handle things? By sticking your nose into other people's relationships? You've made everything so much worse. You want to talk about making things worse?" I asked. "I asked you to come back, so we could have a real conversation. This isn't about your friends, Jessica. This is about us." She sighs loudly, like she was the one dealing with a headache. "Fine," she said. "You clearly want to get something off your chest? So go ahead." I stood there for a moment, just looking at her, defensive, combative, completely blind to where I was coming from. It was like everything I'd been holding in finally snapped. "I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You've been lying, keeping secrets, making decisions that affect both of us, without a second thought, and when I try to bring it up, you act like I'm the problem." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being ridiculous. I haven't lied to you about anything." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You didn't lie when you said, this trip was just a relaxing getaway with your friends? You didn't lie by keeping me in the dark. About how it was even paid for?" She hesitated just for a second, before the attitude came right back. "I told you where the money came from," she snapped. "And the trip wasn't some wild party. Like you're trying to make it sound, we just needed a break. I don't see what the big deal is." "The big deal," I said, my voice hardening, "is that you didn't think it was important to talk to me about any of it. You didn't think it mattered to be honest with me. Do you even know how that feels? To find out everything after the fact? Like I don't even deserve to know what's going on?" She rolled her eyes, like I was being dramatic. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Nathan. It was just a weekend with my friends. It's not like I did anything wrong." "You still don't get it," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't about the trip, Jessica. It's about respect. You pawned your engagement ring, lied about it, and then brushed off my feelings, like they didn't matter. Do you even realize what you've done?" Her arms crossed tightly, her face hard and unbothered. "It's just a ring, Nathan. You're making this into something it's not. Those words hit harder than I thought they would. It's not just a ring, I said quietly. I made that ring for you. It wasn't just jewelry. It was supposed to mean something. About us. About our future. And you treated it like it was nothing. She stared at me, her expression cold. Then, with the kind of tone that made me wonder if I ever really knew her, she said, "If you're this obsessed with a piece of jewelry, maybe you need to rethink what marriage is supposed to mean." That cut deeper than anything else she'd said. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. You're right, Jessica. I do need to rethink this, because it's clear we don't see things the same way. Her eyes flickered for a second. Caught off guard. What's that supposed to mean? It means this is over, I said firmly. I canceled the wedding. I'm done? You've shown me exactly how much this relationship means to you, and I'm not going to keep pretending everything's fine. When it's not, her jaw dropped. You canceled the wedding without even talking to me? I nodded, completely calm. I didn't think I needed your permission, I said. Throwing her words right back at her. For a moment, she just stared at me, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. I didn't wait for her to find the words. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, stuck with the weight of what had just happened. The next few days were honestly surreal. Jessica left the house, packed up her stuff and dipped, without saying where she was going. I didn't ask. Why would I? I was done chasing after her, or trying to figure out what was going on in her head. At first it felt weird. The house was quieter, but also lighter, like I could actually breathe again. By the time a month had passed, I was starting to feel like myself again. But last week I got a message from Jessica, short and to the point. We need to talk. I stared at it for a while, debating if I should even bother responding. But the truth is, I didn't owe her a damn thing. Whatever she wanted to say wasn't going to change what happened. And it sure as hell wasn't going to change the fact that I was moving on. So I left it on read. That was the last I heard from her. And honestly, good riddance. Now let's talk about the ring. At first, I thought about just letting it go. But something kept gnawing at me. I couldn't stop thinking about how Jessica had pawned it, without a second thought, like it didn't mean anything. I don't know if it was pride, anger, or just wanting to reclaim the thing I made with my own hands. But I decided to get it back. The problem? I had no clue which pawn shop she'd gone to. Did I text her? Hell no. Instead, I started retracing steps. I knew Jessica wasn't the type to go out of her way for something like that. She was all about convenience. Made a list of shops near her usual routes, like places she passed on her way to work, or the grocery store. I went to each one, asking if they'd seen a custom rose gold ring with a sapphire. Most of them just gave me blank looks or said no. Finally, at one shop, the guy behind the counter asked, "Did it have an engraving inside? Something like initials or a date?" My heart dropped. I'd added a small engraving with our anniversary date. I nodded. And he pulled it out from behind the counter. Seeing it again hit me harder than I expected. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been stolen. Once I had it back, I couldn't keep it around anymore. It still carried too much baggage, but at least now I got to decide what to do with it. So I sold it. Bittersweet as hell, but also freeing. The money I got went towards something I've wanted to do for years, but never felt like I could. Starting a personal project I'd been dreaming about. Putting that money into something I cared about felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When Jessica found out, I'd tracked down the ring and sold it. She called me furious. "What the hell, Nathan? That was my ring. You had no right to sell it." I simply told her, "I had every right. I made that ring. And you pawned it without even telling me. If it meant so little to you, why should you care what I did with it?" She sputtered for a moment. Before switching tactics, I was going to get it back after the trip. "You're so dramatic." I didn't bother arguing. The ring was mine to reclaim, and selling it felt like reclaiming myself. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. If you're dealing with something similar, here's my advice. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't brush it aside. Don't stay in a situation. Just because you've already put in time or effort, it's not worth it. You deserve someone who respects you and values what you bring to the table, not someone who treats you like a backup plan. As for me, I'm still moving forward. Work's been good. I've got solid friends who've had my back through this. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm on the right track. One step at a time, but it feels like the life I want to build is finally in reach.